Hello, I took part in the Bushiroad Springfest Online European Tournament on Saturday, the 30th of May 2021. I want to thank Bushiroad, ENTCG, the judges, as well as the commentators in this one. It would have been Chris Differentfight and Kai from WCC. I'm kind of amazed how they managed to go through two events, the Asia Oceanic one as well as the European one, without losing excitement. I think a lot of people just died during that. The amount of energy they were able to kind of capture, even towards the end of that European stream, in God knows how many hours they've been doing it for, is remarkable. So I'm going to go through this deck profile that I used to get second place. I kind of decided to go with this last minute when they opened further deck registrations. I decided to change options, mainly because of all this talk about banning Taro. I got a bit worried that I'll never get a chance to try this deck, even after collecting all these SPs. So I decided to kind of use the Worlds list, but hybrid it with Fenrir. The Worlds list that I used last year was a Iwa Nagahime beatdown deck. I've been looking forward to playing that again after the pandemic, but now, a bit to my surprise, things aren't looking very secure, so it's either now or never. I did want to maybe enter with Regalia, but I'm going to leave that one to the side for now, because that one's less likely to get touched. So starting off with 4 copies of Fenrir. So yeah, this is just the name as well as the searching abilities. You can gain 10k power as well when it attacks, and you can also use a bit of utility to revive stuff that you soul blasted, so that's useful to have. Then there's also 2 copies of Vanguard. It helps you manage your soul. You can soul blast with it. So if you're on Amaruda, you can go down to 4 or less, depending. That's, in the case that you would have soul charged more via cards like Estrella of the 4 Heavens or something. It's very handy when you're attacking with it. You can soul charge Taros, or you can stack your deck with triggers. You wouldn't use it for Grapes or Gauger usually, unless the game is looking to last longer, which is handy, but not in the immediate same turn that you're using this. It can also combo with Secret Elsie as well, which I'll get to later on. Next, we've got 2 copies of Iwa Nagahime. You can draw a card with it. It helps you control your soul as well because it's Soul Blast 3. Again, useful for Amaruda at times. And it can gain power based on the shield that you soul charged times 2. So it's very handy because you can soul charge a card from your hand with it. So that's a way to try and get your Gouges or your Taros or your Great Witches in, if you've drawn into them. There's an alternative way as well, which I'll get into in a moment. But I decided not to run Balmage and Sahima because it requires a counterblast, and thankfully I didn't, because I would have never been able to use it in the entire tournament, given how most of my games I've always been sitting on 1 or 0 before getting blasted to 6 or something. Before the Murokuma game is when I got blasted to 6 with. But I had like 2 Glepsons in my hand when I was on 2 damage for that one. So the Sahima didn't really matter that much. Here we've got 4 Kroots. So this is just to help you soul charge 6. Very, very strong staple card. Ever since they revealed this, I've been playing this card in basically non-Astral Poets / non-Regalia decks, sort of. Although I wasn't really playing Regalia. I took a bit of a break from that one until Clan Selection. I didn't really try the Tempest Sphere stuff as much. But this is a very good card because it helps you go through your deck. 6 cards is a lot of cards. There's not really any cards like this at the moment, except for your Amaruda Stride or your Tier Strides. But generally, a lot of cards are a bit more incremental than 6. So yeah, just being able to play something, find your Taros, find your Gouges, and then your Gouges obviously keep going further in. It's what helps you deck out if you are playing the loop build. But this isn't the loop build in this case. This is more for just go turbo through your deck to find Taros. If not for this card, it would be very difficult to soul charge multiple to do a bit of aggro plays. So here we've got 3 Great Witch Grappler. It's a 9k base, so it's quite a good ride target. And it soul charges 2 when it's soul blasted, which is a decent effect. You could also play something like Heat Elemental Bobo. I was considering it, but I couldn't find my 3rd copy. And then I wasn't really that sure in the end. It was last minute, so... But I don't think Bobo would have done anything anyway for me. So I think maybe it's worked to my favour that I chose this card, given how the games went. Then I played 1 copy of Vine. This is a last minute change I made. basically I can discard one card from my hand to retrieve a card from Soul, a normal unit specifically. The reason why this is good is because if you ride Zazen or Elsie, which are one-offs in this case, Elsie, because sometimes you kind of want to play a bit more PG, so you tend to more so search Elsie if you don't have in your hand and you happen to need it via Fenrir's skill, while trying to maybe Soul Charge Vanguard or draw into it, or vice versa if you're lucky enough to draw Elsie, the one-off. But the handy thing about this card is that if someone tries to damage you as well with you riding Zazen, then you can still retrieve it even if you're on 0 damage, so they can't outplay you if you have this card in your deck. So that's a good way to catch them out as well. Another way you could also lose Zazen and Elsie is off of Astrea, which is an on-ride Soul Charge too, but we'll get to that in a sec. So 4 copies of Glepnir, the most important aggro card. This makes it so easy to just restand multiple times in one turn. This thing just made the deck so easy. Like, you look at all these Soul Blast cards we've had previously, right? I mean, Makin wasn't a once per turn, actually. Makin is a promo, which works on attack or boost. It only gains 5k, but it's until end of battle, so I don't think anyone would try to abuse that with Taro. But this card here, it scales 10k power every attack. Every single attack. And you can keep on doing it. See, it's a one-card combo just to do loads of attacks if you can, spam through your deck with Kroot and find your copies. So this is a bit crazy compared to Makin. But then the other ones are just, they're like once per turn abilities in general, so or counterblast restricted, like with Angelic Wiseman V-Series. And you've got cards like Palmet, which you're going to use once, sort of. You have to have like the grade 2 in front of it. Unless you could somehow call another grade 2 in front of it, then you could technically use it twice, while also resetting the grade 1 that boosts it, which is a bit convoluted anyway, and no one would do that. But you've got Broad Antler, you've got Astrea, as well as other examples of on-attack Soul Blasters that work with Taro. But Glepnir is the one that kind of like went a bit out of control. So now you've got Astrea of the Four Heavens. So this bounces back to your hand. It's a Soul Blast on boost at the end of battle. Soul Blast 2, bounce to hand. It's also good as a mulligan 1 card that Soul Charges 2 if you place it on Vanguard. Or you can place it on Rearguard and still mulligan, but you don't get the Soul Charge 2. It's a very useful card. It's fun to play as well with Taro. I've been using this since it first came out, actually, in my homebrew decks. So I really love it. It's also a 7k base, which is helpful. And speaking of 7k bases, there's also Gelja as well. So my main right tag is actually Astrea. But one of the things I can do with Astrea is I can return cards like Gelja or Taro, even Great Witch, to bomb my deck. And what I could do with that is, then if I shuffle my deck afterwards, then I have a chance of hitting those cards because they're not guaranteed to put on the bottom. So with shuffling, we've got these cards. I've chosen to play these over the Order, the Bangle card, because the Bangle doesn't shuffle your deck, whereas this one does. So it's a bit of a trade-off I decided to go for, just so I can have a bit more ways to shuffle, besides using the Fenrir grade 3, because sometimes you might want the option of striding, so if you have this in your hand, then go for it, really. But there are 4 different grade 3s in this deck, so you got a decent chance of hitting something, oftentimes. So I think this is kind of worth playing. It may be an 8k base compared to the G Skull, but the 10k shield helps, and also I'm playing a lot of 7ks anyway, so the risks are lower of someone damage denying me if I went first. 1 copy of Zazen, so that you can play on 0 damage, or sometimes you might even decide to use it even if you've taken a damage, because you might want to save a canvas for something else, or you decide, like in some niche instance, like what I did when I wasn't using Vanagander against Honley combo. I basically decided to use Zazen rather than striding Marduk, so that I can bypass the multiple attacks restrictor that Honley does. So basically I'll go like Glepnir, or rather just Riz in general, before the Vanguard's final swing. So that's sort of something I was trying to do with Zazen. That's one of the plays you can do. That way you can try and sneak in extra attacks, which Marduk wouldn't let you do, because Marduk would get in the way. It would take up one of your first 4 free attacks before you get to your 5th one, and if it's a rearguard, then you can't just waste an attack in a way. Then I've got also Secret Elsie. So this is what you use with Vanagander. On battle, you can Soul Blast. When you have Fenrir as your Vanguard, you can then revive the Soul Blast with Vanagander, and then you Soul Blast again when it's placed back via Fenrir's skill. You can then pop one of your opponent's rearguard. So this was notably used against Valkyrian. I don't think Valkyrian actually... Valkyrian seems a bit iffy at the minute, because, yeah, hand traps they have to kind of worry about that one. But this deck has its own hand trap, so it's sort of got that going for it, which Valkyrian doesn't have. But Valkyrian has the chance to play like a lot of PGs, which I think is quite good. And then we've got the triggers, 3 draw PGs, just for solid defense, because there are going to be battles besides Gas Steel where you kind of can't really fight with numbers sometimes. Then you've got 4 crits, vanillas. I wish I could play Mushu, but I need them for Zazen, so I had to kind of trade off. Zazen's just too important. Another vanilla trigger. This is actually a vanilla. Some people don't know this, but there's no contact or auto ability on this, so you can use it with Zazen. And even vanilla heal triggers. I'd rather play these than counter charges, obviously, because you don't really need counter charge enough, and you'd rather have some defense from damage checks or shield value. And then the important card that actually makes this deck even makes most Genesis decks, besides Regalia, like any good really, is having access to something that gives you a bit of pressure. Otherwise, you can just deal with, you know, defense creep all the way. And then G-Zone, Cycloned, flip this with Zazen, also gives your units 5k power if they're vanillas. Marduk, a way to get Generation Break as well when you attack with your Vanguard, as long as you have 1 Calabash and 6 Soul. 2 Amarudas, gives a unit 10k and a crit, quite nice. Also draws 2 cards, which can help you, you know, accelerate into some more setup, and it still charges 5. So very strong effects. I remember like this was considered, I think, one of the worst strides when it first came out, but yeah, it just came down to what kind of card support you have really to kind of make it a bit better. Like I think when they revealed Stray of the Four Heavens, it sort of bumped up a bit in usefulness. 1 copy of Seabees because I have space for it, although it's very rare that you'd use it. 1 Musepore, it can counter charge, by the way, which is handy. It can also draw as well, and it can also give Rearguard's power for every card you Soul Blast. Then you've got Ultima, another unlikely card, but I just decided to whack it in because of the over trigger, just in case I ever need to use it. Then you've got 1 Tagut, very rarely used, but Genesis G guards, they can be very conditional. They're very hard to use compared to some other clans I've played. Then you've got 2 Lawyers. So this is a GB1, so you can't always make use of this, but it's very good in that it prevents deck out. It can return units to your deck. Units like Gaelja, Great Witch, or even just units that could be useful for other purposes like Glepner, things that you might want to search with Fenrir and so on. 2 Ears, good strong defense. It's also not GB restricted. Just as long as you have 4 different grades in your drop zone, then you're okay with using it. 2 Irises, the easy one to use. You need 3 in drop zone, so you can still dodge anything. There's no grade restriction either with it, so it's quite flexible in exchange for lower shield value. And then Dismal, just in case you have an important rear guard and you don't want them to bully it. So, with that said, that's the second place Fenrir deck profile from the Premium BCS Springfest online event. And thank you again for taking a look. I guess I hope it was an interesting video. I know there's a lot of hate towards the deck right now, but I did try to do my own little sort of nostalgic spin by combining it with the sort of homebrew niche deck I did last year. Anyway, take care. Goodbye.